All right, welcome to the Church Digital Podcast, powered by Stadia Church Planning. This is Jeff here. We've got another great episode set up for you here. We're going off topic a little bit. Off topic, we always go off topic. I don't even know what the topic is of this podcast anymore. From church online to digital church to church planting to on mission, like it's been a very wide variety of topics lately. It's been fun. And in this, I don't know if we're allowed to have fun in this coronavirus season. That just got awkward there for a second. But I've really enjoyed this podcast working alongside Ray and creating content for a lot of you out there. And I've enjoyed hearing how these contents, these podcasts, the blogs, all the resources that we're sharing, the webinars, how they are making a difference out there in churches like yours and in your church. So thank you for that. Let us know. Hit us up on social media. The Church Digital on all Facebook and Instagram, Twitter. It's Deerfedge, and that's my personal account. Jeff Reed backwards Deerfedge. In case you didn't put that together, would love to hear from you on that. So hey, with this episode, I went back close to home, Christ Fellowship Miami, where Ray DeArmas is the digital pastor of. We did a deep dive here in the episode. Ray is really proud, as much as one can be proud in ministry, and I'm not calling him out, but he's really proud of the effort that the kids and students have done, the ministry directors and the leaders and the staff, how good a job they've done in this season of creating content, of doing ministry, of engaging in two-way conversations through the kids and student ministries. And so we wanted to highlight kids and student ministries, talk about maybe some of the challenges, some of the issues, some of the hurdles, some of the successes that we've seen in kids and students. And I thought, hey, I love Christ Fellowship Miami, love the church, would love an opportunity to, sit down with some of the staff and kind of hear how they are doing kids and student ministry in this coronavirus season, what the ministry looks like on Church Online. And so into the conversation, of course, Ray DeArmas, digital pastor at Christ Fellowship Miami, but including Ileana Siljee, who's the weekend experience director for kids ministry. They have a weekend experience director for kids. Like this is phenomenal stuff. And Tony Cobb, who's the ministry director of student ministry, basically the guy who's in charge of the 1,000+ students that Christ Fellowship Miami reaches across all campuses. And so it's a phenomenal conversation dealing with kids and students. But we also talk a lot about small church, big church. We talk a lot about one-way versus two-way communication. Like there's a lot of popular themes that we've been talking about here in the podcasts and in blogs and lately in the season, creating good content. But in addition to the content, have the conversation with it as well. Don't just create content and forget the relational aspects. Relational is so important as well. So you're going to hear a bunch of that in the podcast, and I can't wait for you to hear it. So hey, we got Ray DeArmas, digital pastor, Christ Fellowship Miami, Ileana Siljee, weekend experience director, Tony Cobb for kids, and then Tony Cobb, of course, is the ministry director for students, and myself, Jeff, with the Church Digital, in a conversation that I'm calling Kids, Students, and Church Online. Okay, everybody, here you go.
Yeah, so my name's Tony, and I am a ministry director for students. And I've been here for a couple years. And I got I got 4 kids and a lovely wife, Rachel. And we're in the middle of coronavirus homeschooling, like everybody else. We're having a ton of fun.
Yeah, so four kids probably. I noticed you're in the office. You're still going out to the office. Now that's across the street for you, so that's not that far away.
Right. I literally walk across the street, so don't panic. I'm in the city of Miami, Florida, but I'm 2 houses down from the office. And to make this thing happen without children running around and screaming, we went ahead and walked across the street. So
yep.
Yeah, much appreciation for that. And so we've also got Ileana Siljee here on the podcast as well. Ileana, maybe just tell a little bit about yourself and what you do with Christ Fellowship Miami.
All right, so my name's Ileana, and I am the Kids Weekend Experience Director, and that involves planning all curriculum, all, we call them tag-ins, but they're pretty much just mini events that the kids do for the weekend. And then I help to distribute all information of anything CF Kids related to all of our campuses. So that's part of my role. And then also part of my role is not only the teaching aspect of curriculum, but also the applying aspect, meaning, okay, kids, we taught you this, now how can we apply it? And then some of that includes partnering with our missions, and then every month we have a different mission. So
Awesome. Yeah, I love that, partnering with missions and working, even locally, and helping kids understand kind of what it means to be on mission even at an early age. That's a really sweet thing. So the reason for the podcast, is what, like we talked about, is well, first off, all you guys, both you guys work at Christ Fellowship Miami, where Ray's digital pastor, and straight up Ray's very proud of what Christ Fellowship is doing now in context of kids ministry and student ministry in this coronavirus season. And even churches that I work with, often some of them have been looking at Christ Fellowships, looking at how you guys are doing kids and student ministry, and what it looks like to really engage and do ministry with these age groups when you're like not able to physically gather. And so, I wanted to give Ray just an opportunity here to talk through with you guys, to, ask some questions and really dig into what kids ministry, what student ministry looks like, at Christ Fellowship Miami, and what lessons are we learning from this? Because there's always room for improvement. There's always something. But a lot of times the churches that we work with, they may not even know where to start in this.
We'll kind of go back and forth between kids and students because, there's so much to dive into, and we're going to get through as much as we can today, because both kids and students at CF have done a good job of not just building content, but trying to create community around the content. And that's really been the key with Church Online the entire time that Jeff and I have been doing this podcast is, compelling content is one thing, and we want churches to create that, but really creating and centering community around that is a big deal. And from the get, as soon as, this whole thing was announced that we're not having church this weekend, that was happening a couple of weeks ago, both students and kids dove into plans to execute not just as fast as possible, but as excellent as possible to make sure that they had both content and community up for that weekend. And so that's one of the reasons why why I still am so proud of what we're doing, because not only have they, created plans, but they've been adaptable and shaping those plans. And so, Ileana, just kind of take us through the process, like from day one, like what that looked like for you guys that Friday a few weeks ago when all that happened. And then, kind of walk us through some of that, what that's looked like for kids.
So, Ray was part of some of the communication with this. And originally we thought we would just post the lesson online. We thought, okay, that's the easiest. Maybe that's just, oh, I'm sorry, my dog is barking right now.
Yappy dog. That is awesome.
It's peacock mating season, so they're going crazy.
Whoa, that just got graphic. Really?
It is. So they're making all the noises and she's freaking out. Okay, anyway, so we thought originally we'll just post a lesson. And even Ray challenged us and he's like, okay, why don't you guys just do CF Kids Online? We used to do it in the past. Why not do it now? And then he even suggested, let's do one that we have in the archive. My hesitation with that was we had built so much momentum for the series that we were in, and our kids were crazy excited to the point of like, I felt like they were so engaged with, we're doing the All In series, we're teaching them our CF Kids values and even about generosity. And every week we kept seeing more and more and more kids engaged with it, that we thought, okay, if we just threw in a random lesson, it would lose momentum of the series. So we decided, let's continue our series, let's record something. And then that way our kids have some form of normalcy. And that's the other thing with kids, you need that. And it helps them to calm down, especially in the season. They're confused. They don't know what's going on. And so we very, very quickly wrote up a script and recorded that. I think we recorded Friday and then posted Saturday. And then we thought, okay, let's not just have the lessons available. What can we do to allow parents to engage with their kids afterwards? So right now, I guess what we've been mainly focusing on is obviously providing the content that we would have provided on the weekend, and then engaging parents to be that lead. The next step is trying to figure out, like you guys have already discussed, like how do we have a sense of community? And some of the things that we've been doing that kind of have been happening that way is our 5th grade leadership. So we've also had other leaders create videos for that. They send it out, and our original intent was same thing, send it out, let the kids watch the video and engage with it, with the content that they could download. But then we found our fifth grade leaders wanted to teach their class. They're like, I don't care if this is happening, I want to teach it. And so some of them, with the actual director of the campus, all do what we're doing now. They either Google Hangout or Zoom with the parent there as well. And they teach their lesson. And that was actually pretty cool. And then we got screenshots of all these kids on the screen, and they're so engaged. And again, it's just that idea of normalcy of like, no, I still want to learn this leadership principle. Like, I don't care if I have to be at my house. And then to help that, we also sent them, every time we learn a new value, they get a bracelet. So we mailed them all their new bracelet. That way, again, they just feel like we're continuing. We're not freaking out. This is normal. So that's what we've been doing in kids.
Man, that's so special that you guys have really not let some of these things that are going on in an era of social distancing and everything else become barriers that you can't break through in terms of creating that kind of community. And then how are you guys working that out with the parents of the fifth grade leadership, like in terms of getting the permission to do said, Zoom Hangouts or Google Hangouts and all that?
It's communication from the director, the director and the leader. So we're about 3 months into our leadership program. And in general, from the very beginning, there has to be communication between the parents and the teacher. And so that relationship has already been built so that it's easy for them to say, hey, and the parent's name, can we do this thing? Obviously, with the parent's permission is the only way that they can log on. And then with the director monitoring it, or the other leader, it's a way to manage that. Like, I heard what Tony was saying. It is scary. Like, how do you manage it, especially dealing with kids? I probably wouldn't do something like that for any other age group except for fifth grade.
That's good. So there are limitations to this, just to be clear for the rest of our audience. There are clear limitations as to which age groups that even as an organization, we feel comfortable doing this with.
For sure. And I think about how teachers are doing this right now. Technically, they're doing the Zoom calls too. And God willing, the parent is there too to make sure nothing unsavory is happening. So that's kind of how that came about.
Yeah, my child's first grade teacher had a Zoom call this past week with the class, and it was a good way for them to create community. The teacher was on, but both Lauren and I were behind the iPad in the same way, just making sure that everything was cool. And what it did, honestly, like, I didn't expect this. What it did for my 6-year-old, I mean, her complexion, everything was just through the roof. Like, man, other kids to interact with right now, especially in an era where it's like, man, I can play with the kids on my block, but I can't really play with anybody else. So that's really great that you guys are doing that. Tony, you guys did a great job in creating content, but not just that, like, since then it's exploded into this multi-platform 7-day-a-week interaction type deal with students. Man, talk to us as far as like where it started and where it's at now and how that's gone. Because to me, it's almost like you guys became a TV network overnight, where it's like, we got 7-day-a-week programming. We've got lots of opportunities for you to engage and interact. It's just been so monumental to me. So tell us about it.
We got to give you guys props. I forgot, Jeff and Ray and you guys. I don't know where our church and where the world would be without guys like you guys, because, there was a digital world that the church, we kind of knew about. But without you, we would have been dead in the water. And so just thank you guys for setting up things like this, resources, because when all this stuff hit, man, we truly would have been out on our own and just lost. And so, man, because of you guys, you're helping a ton of us out. And so honestly, like, all the stuff that we've been doing at Students it was a platform that was established long ago by, the folks at Life Church with Church Online. We got to use like a great platform and just plug and play all of our content that we've been doing. Our church has fantastic facilities, so we can use, the multi-camera setup and switchers and all that kind of stuff, which we have. We've made this public in Miami, but if you're in Miami and you're hearing this, we have opportunities for you to come and record. And so if you're still looking for a place and you don't have a place to come and do that, man, we'd love to help you out. so we're just taking stuff that we're seeing other people doing and repurposing it and repackaging it, because we're lost in a sense that we're trying to figure this out as well. We've done a lot of teaching from the Bible. We've done a lot of relational ministry and student ministry. But this is something brand new to us. We're in a world where students get their content primarily from a different source than us. They get it from YouTube, they get it from social media. And so what's happening is we're having to compete with the likes of somebody who gets millions and millions of followers. And all of a sudden we have to jump in that game. And so we're having to figure out on the fly, essentially rebuilding an airplane that's already flying. It's craziness, but and so I appreciate Ray, you giving us props, because it's just one of those things where there are days where we feel like we're failing miserably at this. And there are days that we feel like, man, that kind of worked. And so over the past couple of weeks, we've tried a lot of things. And so just a couple of things that we try. So we obviously wanted to keep our consistent format we do our primary service on Friday night. So we wanted there to be some consistency. I love what Ileana said. Our kids are thriving for something normal, some normalcy in their life. And so what our kids see is, it's church. What is it that feels normal? So a message feels normal, worship feels normal, small groups feel normal. And so that's what we tried to throw out immediately, as good as we could. And so we had somebody teach a message. We put that on Instagram Live. Apparently you could do that. We never knew. I mean, Ray helped us out. We jumped on that pretty quick. We did the church online platform. We had some worship, in the can is what you call it. We had some pre-recorded worship, but that backfired really quickly because in the worship set, there were kids in it. So that Friday night we had canceled service and said, hey, we're going to go all online. And there were kids in the worship set. And so in the chat, there were a bunch of kids saying, hey, you guys lied to us. There's a bunch of kids in the set. So that backfired. So the next week, it was awesome.
This legit happened, by the way. Like I was in the chat with Tony. People were upset thinking that we had like some kind of, I don't know, like underground worship set where it's like all the
real, like,
folks came together and worship God and recorded this,
Right.
How dare you do church and not invite me?
I mean, for real, that's exactly what it felt like. It was, and so it's, we've had a lot of these conversations where it's, if you're not failing, you're not trying. Mm-hmm. And so that was one of those where we're like, sure. Yeah, that was one of those. That makes sense. We told everybody we canceled church, and there was, I mean, literally, I think the opening line from Kevin, our worship leader, was, hey, all right, CF students, stand up to your feet and come to the front. And I was like, oh, but we're not there. Okay. Yeah. That's awful. That was a miss. Anyways. So we did, try to create that normalcy. And so worship, message, small groups, to make it feel like what we do every Friday night. And so then what we did was we were listening to kids, listening to leaders. And that's what we've been doing this whole time. And so I'm 38 years old. I'm way past the age of kids that we're ministering to. And so one of the things that I'm learning is, I need to hear their feedback and listen to what they're wanting and what they're needing, what their parents are wanting and needing. And so that's what we've been doing. We've been trying to get, what is it that you're needing? Mm-hmm. And taking that and applying it. And so kids were like, hey, we want something. Is there any way we could do something every day? And so we took that and ran with it. We said, okay, let's do something every day. It doesn't take that much from us. And so we started, what could we do every day? Just a quick Bible study, or there's a lot of kids in trouble. A lot of kids, like, the word lonely kept coming up. Like, we're just alone. We're by ourselves, isolated. And so we said, okay, let's have an opportunity to pray for kids and things like that. So Tuesdays and Thursdays, we send out, hey, what can we pray for you about? And then we go on Instagram Live and we just pray. And that itself has been fantastic. Wednesdays, we do, we do a TikTok challenge where we just throw it out and kids can interact and engage with us. And then Fridays we do our normal service where, we have message. And then Mondays we have our student directors where they bring like a little devotion and encourage and things like that. So we're engaging our kids all throughout the week. But what I tell our team is this: there are things, and Jeff and Ray, I'm sure you guys know this, there are things that are going to be created in the next month that haven't been created yet. And so 80% of what we do now will change. Well, 80% of what we do now is going to stay the same, is what I say. But 20% of what we do is going to change every week, because it's going to have to adapt to what people are coming out with and new tools and new tricks. And it's going to have to be us listening and putting our ear to the ground and figuring out how to do ministry in this season. Yep. We've got to be consistent and we've got to stay steady, but at the same time, we've got to be able to grow with people that are smarter at us than this. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the flexibility that's going to allow us to grow in this season and not our stubbornness is going to hold us back. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be the control that's going to keep us from driving and being fantastically great in this season. Mm-hmm. But it will be the ability to say, okay, that 20% that has to be different, it's going to make us even better. And so what I've challenged my team is like every week you have to come up with something new. What are we going to do new this week? And they're like, is that going to be every week? Every week. Mm-hmm. Until we get through this season, we're going to do something new. We're going to engage a kid differently. We're going to do, so that's kind of our format. We're going to engage kids on a daily basis, from their feedback. We're going to keep consistent with our service, but honestly, we are engaging something every week. We're going to do something new, try something new, and it may fail, 90% of the time, but we're going to figure out how to connect with our kids. So
it's good. So real quick for both Ileana and Tony, what are some of the feedback loops that you guys have opened up to get some of this? Because I think it's great that both of you are staying, just ready and adaptable, but not a lot of people are used to, and especially in ministry, to hearing from their people what it is that they need and what it is that they want that they'll actually interact with. And so what are some of the feedback loops that you guys have opened yourself up to that you would recommend to other church leaders as well?
Well, so we got parents who were actually taking pictures or videos of their kids watching the online service. And this week we just got a video from a kid. He gave us the feedback and he's like, it's great. You guys did a good job, but I need more worship. And we're like, oh, okay. So taking that into consideration, we're adding more worship. And so we have been finding that people have been finding us actually to give us that feedback, messaging our directors. Our directors would then tell us, hey, this is the feedback I got from this parent. This is feedback I got from this kid. And that has been really helpful because we're tailoring it for that exact audience. So that's worked out pretty well.
It's good. Tony, same?
We call them. I mean, it's a novel idea. Holy cow. We just pick up a phone and we call people. No. So first week we had all of our directors call every single one of our students in our database, which was crazy amounts. It was thousands of kids. And the feedback that we got just from that was incredible. And just the amount of love and support that families felt, was fantastic. And so that was the feedback that started it all. And so then what we'll continue to do is we create a parent group. So just like this Zoom call, we'll create a specific group at different campuses. We'll select parents and say, hey, we want to invite you on to a conversation maybe once a week, to say, hey, what are you seeing? How is this engaging your kids? So from a middle school parent to a high school parent, and just give us feedback and just unbridled. Hey, here's the questions before we ever jump on this. We want you to see how this is working. And so that's how we're going to do it.
Both novel ideas, and it's great. Both of you are getting feedback from different sources, and yet, one is unsolicited and then one is completely solicited. It's funny, Tony, because last week, Jeff and I had a conversation with Erdis, who's basically the creative director for a church up in Tampa. And he was talking about how they made phone calls and like literally told influencers, hey, we want you to repost. He's like, for us, there is no means of old school and new school right now. There's a means of just communicating out to our people and just doing whatever it takes to kind of get in that kind of engagement with them. So I think it's great that both of you are taking different approaches to get in touch with our folks. So now, what are some of the challenges that we're noticing in terms of that community aspect? What are some of the challenges that we're seeing? Ileana, you want to break down some of that in terms of kids? Like, what's some of the challenges that you guys are wrestling through now, and what are some ways that you're doing to take on those challenges coming up?
So we're trying to build community right now through our Instagram. However, the challenge is that has never, our kids' Instagram specifically has never really been poured into as much as it is now. So we don't have the following, the followers. We don't have just consistency, and that's like the key word. And Ray, you always challenge me with that. You always say like, when I present a new idea, you're like, that's fine, but it needs to be consistent. That way you build momentum. That way people know. And right now, I think that's the challenge, is letting our parents know that we're even here, and finding that consistency, which we have not found yet. I would say students, Tony, you could speak more into this, but students had a pretty good following on their Instagram. And so kids are used to going there and seeing the content, and they know exactly what to do. But now we're finding we have to kind of train our parents where to go. Like, hey guys, this is where you go. And on top of that, then you have to go to this other page for more information or more resources or more. And so that's what we've been working on. And it's been a challenge. And just in full transparency, sometimes I find myself comparing to, I follow a lot of other kids ministries, and just seeing the consistency with their Instagram page and the amount of parents that engage. And I'm like, I want to be there, but I have to realize too, it takes time. And I think it was something we always wanted to do, but I think this season is what's going to push us to start doing it. And then God willing afterwards, continue to do it too. Because we see the importance, we see parents engaging, we read their comments when we present something. We started bedtime stories on Wednesdays at 6:30. And even that, we posted at like 6:45 because the video wasn't uploading, and there was all this like, we're just trying to be consistent. So that's been the biggest challenge, I think, out of everything.
That's
Hold
great.
on, back up, pause. What's bedtime stories?
Okay, so like Tony has the Instagram plan. Our Instagram plan is to at least post 2 fun crafts for families to do together. And then Mondays and Fridays, and then every Wednesday we read the Jesus Storybook Bible, with like, we want our parents to engage with their kids by reading it. So we have 2 directors reading the Jesus Storybook Bible. We play a game, and then we do questions like, all right, guys, from this story you read, Jesus served others. What are ways that how can you serve others in this season? And then we love you. Bye guys. Good night. And it's also a way for our kids to see our directors too, and see that they're still there. They're still available, that they care for them. And so that's something that we've been trying.
That's an awesome idea. Like that didn't even cross my mind. I mean, not that I'm like hanging out in kids content area, but the idea of doing like a bedtime story at night, and using the Jesus Storybook, which is such a phenomenal resource. We'll link to it in the show notes. Like that's a great idea. And that's super easy. That's like grab an iPhone, put it on selfie mode, do a recording from your phone, reading from a book. Good job.
Well, we did it with an iPhone. So yeah.
Yeah.
We did it that way. We had the directors come in. We literally had an iPhone. All right, tell me this bedtime story. Press start. They read the story, fun, animated like they always do. And then we do close-ups on the picture, the way the kids can see it. And then, yeah.
Love that.
That's a beautiful idea. I love it. And, it's that kind of novel thinking that I'm telling you, it's going to connect with parents. And I love, Ileana, that you were honest enough to kind of just talk about, hey, so this is something that we're building, we're working on this, you know? And so Tony, you guys have obviously, you've been trying to build community for some time. How have you reaped some of the benefits off of that in this? How has that worked out for you guys?
Yeah, I think, that's an area that we're trying to get better at. I think we've, what we're finding is, that's something our kids are really craving, is that community aspect. Like I was saying before, you have, our kids have access to unlimited amounts of content. So we're just throwing our content in the mix of all of this now. And so they're responding, they connect with our content, but it seems like what they're craving is that relational element. So what we've been trying to do is find a great tool that allows them to connect in the best way. Obviously, I think they still prefer that face-to-face connection, because it's the one thing that the church still provides, that social media and technology it hasn't been able to. But what's happening now is you're meshing the two. It's we're forcing the issue of you have to be able to be relational through technology. And so it's things like this, through Zoom. So what we're trying out, and honestly, this is like right now on the fly, we're trying to beta test where we would do, like Church Online's platform, where we would just do, type in questions from our small group lesson. And it would engage, I would say probably 20% of the kids that were watching the message, but it wasn't really engaging. That was the feedback that we were getting. It wasn't like, man, that felt great. And so what we're trying to do now is see if we can take another step and say, okay, let's try a platform like Zoom, and see if we can, utilize the breakout rooms or utilize the webinar format to where a kid feels like they're sitting in that circle, in that small group space, and engaging with their leader, someone who cares, someone who's going to connect with them on that consistent basis, especially during this time where they're isolated and they feel like they're alone. Someone who's going to be consistent in their life. Let's see if we can do that, and then provide that leader tools and equip them with better resources, and see if that can make the difference. And so that's where we're at right now. And so we're going to try to launch that really within the next week, trying to prepare and train our leaders to launch that. So,
all right. So we have a lot of churches that maybe don't have a lot of the same resources that listen to our podcast. Christ Fellowship, we're very blessed to have, an extensive kids and student department, partly because we're multi-site and we've got so many people in different locations. But I've worked for the church where the student guy, me at the time, was volunteer, and our kids director was either part-time or volunteer. And so in each of your ministries, I'm going to start with Ileana, what would you say is like one next step that you would advise for them to try this week to help connect with their people? And it doesn't matter if it's old school or new school. What's one step that they can do to engage their people, especially during this time in the middle of this crisis?
I definitely think you don't need a production crew or whatever to engage your parents. You're right. You could just use your iPhone. I honestly think it's something as simple as doing an Instagram live of the lesson, or just even, hey parents, just checking in, want to make sure you guys are okay. How can I pray for you? Just creating that atmosphere where they can see the face of the director, and that they're still finding a way to teach a lesson, but it doesn't have to be anything crazy. Thankfully, kids aren't as vicious in things that they see online, so I don't think they'll mind if it's just Instagram live in your house and you're trying to teach the lesson. So I don't know how if students are more unforgiving with that aspect, but that was something that I had shared with our people too. I was like, it doesn't need to be crazy. Kids just want to see your face. They just want to see consistency. They just want to see that someone is giving their lesson and it's normal.
Yeah, it's funny, Ileana, you mentioned that because I was reflecting on the fact a couple of weeks ago before school, made that shift and that change. I was listening to a bunch of my older daughter's classmates talk about Ninja on Twitch. They were talking about him, he's become like one of the biggest celebrities for them,
Yeah.
Fortnite superstar, all this stuff. They're literally, he used to be broadcasting on Twitch. Now he's kind of shelling out some new platform. But it's just him playing video games, nothing else, no over the top
in his house.
Yeah. Like that's it. And the guy's making millions of dollars and kids are bought into it. Like, and so I think what you're saying is 100% true, that it doesn't have to be this crazy over the top production. Tony, same question. Like so youth pastor who's volunteer or, part-time pay, full-time hours, like what would be one thing that you would tell him, hey man, here's your next step in terms of engaging your students if you've not started already?
Honestly, it's probably more the relational connection, and it's the consistency. So consistently, relational, like content, like you can get content, like you can connect with them. If you want to do like you can do a FaceTime or WhatsApp or, you can even do, there's, a free way of doing Zoom and things like that. Like you can set up, just be consistent. You can do your own Bible study. You can do your own, but if you're not even equipped to do your own Bible study, grab somebody else's content and throw it up there and just connect. Like there's so many great features that allow you to connect nowadays. I think that if you just be consistent, what you'll find is, man, kids they're gonna jump on and really thrive off of that. They want to be needed and known. That's still true in the digital world as it was in the physical. People want to be needed and known. And so it doesn't, that's probably the benefit of a smaller church versus the giga church or the mega church or whatever, is that it's a lot easier to know people on a personal level now. And to be honest with you, the smaller church, they're much better at that than say the bigger churches.
That's so interesting, because the smaller church right now feels inadequate. And actually, I was on another podcast with somebody yesterday, not one of mine. We were talking about this. The small church feels inadequate to be able to keep up because they're measuring themselves based on the content that the bigger churches are doing. I mean, Ileana, at some level, you even attested to that in this podcast, where you're looking at other churches and the engagement that's what's happening, and so you're wishing you had that and are working towards that. The goal, I would imagine, in this coronavirus season, we've touched on it a little bit here. It's not broadcasting the one message. It's not that one-way communication. There's so much one-way communication right now. Disney Plus, Netflix, Hulu, these are all one-way communication. I can sit down and I can binge a show and I can be as isolated as anybody else on the planet is right now. I think the challenge for the church is that two-way, and figuring out how to engage in a two-way conversation to interact. Some of the things that I love from this is even things like getting on a phone and calling, Tony, your words, 1,000 people. I mean, I can't think of any lower tech way to engage with someone than actually picking a teenager,
right,
than picking up the phone and actually trying to do a voice call. But at some level, like the value that it has, that shows that enables them to have a conversation, to let them know that they're loved in that.
Right.
Binge watching The Office or Friends on Netflix does not tell me I'm loved. That two-way conversation lets people know in this coronavirus season that I am loved. So I love that. Thanks for that. And small church out there that's listening, there's definitely an opportunity to jump all over that, because to the point, bigger churches struggle to have that individual conversation because in Tony's situation, he's got 1,000 kids he's got to have an individual conversation with. Mm-hmm. That is a logistical nightmare. A smaller church, you've got a huge opportunity to engage with people right where you are, and not try to compete with the big, but use the strength of the small to have relationships in deep ways. Tony, I'm sorry I cut you off. You were saying?
Yeah. And even more than that, I think there are things that a smaller church can can teach the larger church. And so don't be afraid to do that. I say in this season, like we tell our staff, like our job profiles have all but been deleted.
Yes.
We're all new. And so it's almost the church world, our the size of our churches have been deleted because it's all ambiguous now. How many people watch your message is pretty ambiguous. It's because it may mean something, it may mean nothing. We'll see in 3 months. And so what's happening is the small church, you have a value to bring to a medium size, a large size church, because the truth is the relational things that you have learned really can contribute to someone who has learned a lot of skills in, say, like managing levels of leaders and systems and things like that. I think there's a lot of things that they've learned and a lot of equity they can bring. And vice versa. There's other things, but yeah, I think there's a ton of value that they bring. So
we've talked about sharing content, or we've talked about utilizing other people's content. I know there's some licensing, or at least there may have been licensing. I think some companies may have released the licensing, but this is completely out of my league. So where can people get content maybe to repackage and reutilize? Who at this point is okay with letting their content go online? Like, give some recommendation for churches that are out there wondering on that, both on the kids and, if appropriate, on the student side.
So we do, Tony does this as well. We do purchase Orange curriculum, and Orange curriculum does allow you to post content as long as it's on a password protected site or something like Vimeo, where someone can't try to rip off what they have. So plus they sent out an email last week in response to all of this with all of their content that you can send out to parents without you having to do anything. Honestly, you just forward that email. It has all these links. You can watch a Bible story video. It has articles on how to talk to your kids about the coronavirus. It has all of these things that they're providing for whoever has a subscription with them. Other churches that I have reached out to in the past, and I would have to see if it's still true now, is Crossroad Kids Club has always released their content for free as well, without having to do password protected or anything like that. Saddleback, I reached out to them. Same thing as Orange. They just want to make sure that if you're providing it, it's a private link. That way no one can try to rip off their stuff. And those are the 3 that I've looked into so far. Oh, and KidSpring from New Spring. They have a resource website in general that they provide free resources for kids.
Yeah. And Life Church, do they have kids curriculum with all this stuff?
Life Church has that as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean they share everything.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah, that's what
including student guys. So yeah, anyway, that's another story. So Tony, what do you got?
Yeah. So I would say that's the primary one that I would go to is open.church, which is going to be Life Church's primary one, because you have a ton of great churches that partner with Life Church as well that are going to funnel their free content on there. And so if you go open.church and then click on the resources tab, they have students as well as small groups or kids curriculum. And there's a ton of great free resources and then, I mean, honestly, the good old Google, if you Google free resources for ministry, you're going to be surprised what pops up. Especially now, a lot of people will use that content. So the stuff that Ileana was mentioning, as well as those things, that is those are gold. And then never be afraid to ask. Call someone and ask. So just because it's not on there doesn't mean they wouldn't give it to you.
Yeah. And that's the exact attitude that we took with Orange, correct? Because at first, and this is no offense to Orange, we're deeply appreciative of what they've allowed us to do in this time. But at first that question was up in the air, right?
Yep. So we reached out to Orange and Saddleback because we use a lot of their videos. We literally just asked them, exactly like Tony's saying, we're like, hey guys, in the season, what can we do with your content? And they responded pretty quickly.
Yep. And Orange, we are a multicultural city. And so we have, Orange has fantastic Spanish options. They have English, things like that. And so um, we're looking for all that kind of content. So we're able through Orange to be able to do, to offer alongside the content that we put out, we can actually offer a Spanish version, because a lot of our parents of our students, Ileana knows this, that we have families that don't speak English at all. And so as they're sitting alongside a middle school or a high schooler, they can actually go along with the message with those notes in Spanish. So
we found that's been helpful too for our global campuses, who same thing. They were in the same boat as us, and they're like, what do we do? And so at least Orange providing the Spanish has helped out a lot.
Yeah, and that's going to make for a great podcast down the road that I think we'll revisit, is bilingual ministry. That's something that's huge in Miami. And, not only CF had, we've brought back a lot of that in terms of what we're doing digitally, but we've expanded it, Jeff. Last week, we launched CF Kids Online in Spanish as well.
No kidding.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Tony's talking about student resources as well that we're providing. This is a big deal. This is not just as part of our global strategy, but even it's a local strategy. We've got 60% in Miami-Dade County where our church lives that still consider Spanish their primary language. And that might not be the case for the kids. Me, myself, I'm a third generation immigrant. Ileana, the same, you're either second or third, where English is our primary language, but that doesn't mean that the parents don't want to interact or don't feel more comfortable engaging with their kids in English. And so we want to make sure and provide them resources so that they can still spiritually lead their kids, even if it's in a different language.
That's right. Yeah, we're seeing the global church, especially South America, Cuba, what they're able to do with our content, Orange's content via us in Spanish. It's tremendous. I mean, what God's doing in those countries is absolutely fantastic. And I mean, especially now in this season, has been a tremendous blessing to be able to gift them that content. Holy cow. I mean, it because before it was night and day. They didn't have access to that. And I don't know, Jeff, I mean, if Amy, your wife, I know she does school teaching and stuff like that. One of the biggest dilemmas that we've been seeing in the city is when kids have gone home to do education at home, is that not bilingual parent, maybe they're predominantly Hispanic and they only speak Spanish, is being able to teach that student who's been being taught in English. That's been a huge issue. And so we've been hearing that, from the front lines. And so it's anything that we could do to supplement those two things. It's say, look, we're teaching your kid in English, but alongside that, here it is in Spanish. And so it's been a tremendous help.
Yeah, I love that philosophy of Spanish, and even from my time at Christ Fellowship, because Miami is such a bilingual, trilingual, quadlingual. There's so many cultures.
That's right.
Rich. Right. I mean, this truly is the melting pot of it all, and so to be able to utilize those resources in Spanish. I mean, maybe the kids are reading them in Spanish, maybe not. Yeah, it does open up, some global campuses and some work down in Latin and South America. But to better empower the parents to do ministry to the kids because you're speaking in the parents' heart language as opposed to making them try to take something out of context and translate it where they may not be comfortable with that yet. That is a awesome reason to go through all the effort of doing the Spanish and the translation of that. Ray, we're going to have to park out. I'd love to even revisit maybe like the ASL, American Sign Language, the deaf stuff, at some point. That's, it's one of the, I think it's like in the top 3 largest unreached people groups in the world is the hard of hearing, the deaf. In American Sign Language, ASL, that's just America as opposed to the other national sign languages, because I know they're all over the place. At some point it opens up into a wider scope of sign language, but there's that group has always been close to my heart, and looking at online as a way to reach those people, deaf people, hard of hearing people, is that's near and dear to me. Maybe it's because I'm 40% deaf myself in my right ear, but that's another thing. So, ironically, I always put my wife on the right side. No, I'm kidding, because
Oh,
that joke will be
Yeah.
cut out, and that will not make it in at
That's a
all.
quick edit
So
right there.
that is a quick edit right there. So hey, but this has been a really good podcast, Ray, as you're landing the plane.
Yeah, I want to once again, and it's not just because I work with them, but I want to applaud what we've been able to do in CF Kids and CF Students. And if you want to check out more, check out at CF Students or at CF Kids Miami. We'll put links in the show notes to their Instagram, just because that's an easy way to get started, and then to follow them on different platforms if necessary, just to see some of the stuff that we're doing. But here's the thing: I was kind of thinking back when I was a kid. There was a show I used to watch called The Wonder Years. Some of you may be aware of that, especially if you're an 80s and 90s kid. But Kevin Arnold one day was, he was heralded by all of his friends because he was able to ask a girl out on a date, and he was sitting amongst them, a table full of nerds. And he breaks the fourth wall and tells us through his thoughts, he said, for some reason they were all looking to me for guidance. And then I realized, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. And I've never forgotten that.
That's right.
And this is the truth. Like right now, you heard it first from these two. We're trying things. We're not the experts, but we're trying things. And right now, we're all kind of flying blind. And so let me tell you, these two are leading the way just by saying, hey, look, I don't have all the answers, but I've got a good working eye. And here I am trying to lead the way. Take their advice, heed it, take it, build off on it, share that back with us. Tell us how you're doing it better. We want this to be interactive as well, so that we can minister to our people better, because we're all in the same boat. We're all learning.
Yeah, so good. Ileana, as we're landing the plane, any closing thoughts, anything on your end?
Yeah, just recently I listened to something Pastor Omar, he met with 3 other local Miami pastors, and Rich Wilkerson had mentioned from the VU, he was like, grocery stores aren't going to be the same after this. This isn't going to be the same. He listed all of these, and then he said the church isn't going to be the same. And I think if we keep thinking that, oh, I just can't wait for this to be over so things can go back to normal, I think we are shooting ourselves in the foot, to be honest. I think this is a time to be innovative, and it's a time to also be open to maybe where God is leading us. Because I think God is working greatly in this season, despite everything that's crazy that's going on. I think if we keep thinking to ourselves, I'm just waiting this out until it's back to normal, that is going to be a mistake. I think we should be praying and seeking, and okay, God, how can I still expand your kingdom with what's happening now, and then what's going to be the aftermath of this?
Yeah, well said, very well said. Tony, as we're landing the plane, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I just double down on what Ileana was saying. I think that's so good. I was telling our team this past week, I was reminding them, and I think the story has been told a couple of times in history, and so I don't actually think it's probably true because it's told a couple of times. But it was when Cortez landed, and he basically defeated the the Mayans. And so
way to go, global history here, man. I was not expecting that walking
listen,
into
Man, this is a Pat Riley story, man. This led us to a championship point, so I'm
That's
all
what
about
I
it.
I prefaced it by it's probably not true, and so if you knock me on my facts, it's there you go. But the story was like he landed on the shores of South America with only a few hundred boats, and to go up against a few million people with a few hundred boats and a couple of thousand men was ludicrous. And so his speech to these men as they offloaded the boats was, burn the boats. And it was profound. And so like the idea was, and this is what I was telling my team was, if you have the opportunity to retreat, you always will. If you don't, you'll get creative. So the only way home is through victory. We're going to use their boats to get back home. Like that's the idea. And so in this season, it's what Ileana was saying.
Yeah.
Like we can't go back home the old way. We got to go back home the new way. And so I think that's the new thing. Don't ride the old boat back home. Let's figure out the new way, because if you're consumed with we can retreat, you're gonna miss out on all of the creative things that we could do to win the battle. And so that's what's inspiring us these days, is all the new things that we can do.
Well, I just fact checked you, referencing Stephen Curtis Chapman's "Burn the Ships," which is a song back from the '90s that he literally wrote about this whole Cortez
There
thing.
it
The
is.
year was
Come on.
1519 on the eastern shore of Mexico. I can read the lyrics. We'll include it in the show notes, but you are spot on.
Now, I don't want to tell you this, but if you listen, now that I've actually been in Miami for a couple of years, you don't want to have Hispanic people fact check Cortez, that whole account of him defeating, but that's a whole nother podcast.
Depending on which Hispanic culture, some of them.
Yeah, I was gonna say
Spain,
Hispanic culture,
weird.
like they get offended when you say that Cortez defeated them. Like come on, man.
Some do. I'm telling you now, some Cubans consider themselves more from Spain than indigenous, and so it's a whole thing.
Yeah.
Anyways, all that said, I'm so happy that we finally did a podcast where Stephen Curtis Chapman was mentioned. That's it.
Listen, I am just glad I could contribute my little bit to this conversation here. That
Right.
If nothing else, I contributed Stephen Curtis Chapman. Yes, good times. Rays, we're landing. Any closing thoughts?
You can tell how proud I am of this team. And guys, I want to thank you again for coming on the pod. This is big for a lot of other churches, and thank you so much, Jeff, for affording us the time to do this. And this team's not done rolling, as you can tell. They've got a fire lit underneath them, and they've got a lot of ideas that they're going to be executing. Like, this isn't just theory. A lot of these things are already rolling out as of today. And so, I just want to encourage them, and I want to encourage you out there who are listening to try something new this week. Give it one shot, even if it fails, even if you feel like, oh man, what if they make fun of me or something else? I'm going to tell you right now, anything you do with the idea of engagement in terms of your students, don't concern about the celebrity aspects, be concerned about engaging and talking to them, and you will see that victory that Tony's talking about. You will.
Awesome. Two-way conversation is so important in today. Love the one-way conversation, pushing content. Figure out how to do two-way respectfully of that, because students, kids, adults, that's how we feel loved in today. Not the one-way, the two-way. Figure out how to do that. That's the strength of the internet, especially in this coronavirus season. So, hey, Tony, Ileana, Ray, thanks for jumping on this podcast. This has been great. Love it, and looking forward to, we'll have to continue the conversation about Spanish languages, all sorts of fun things, but that is not today. So for Tony, for Ileana, for Ray, this is Jeff at the Church Digital. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time here at the podcast. Y'all have a good day.